Hello, this is going to be yet another update to my globe prediction. I think I'm up to 3 or 4 updates now. Every time that I make a video thinking that I've got the most recent information, it seems that there's always something more that comes out that makes me reevaluate my previous prediction and to try to get it more close to what they should theoretically expect when they get there. For context, I would suggest you watch this playlist if you're not already aware of all of the latest details. Just for a quick recap, the first prediction I made, I thought that they would be over here because I did a search for Union Glacier and this is what came up. Then the second video I made, I was able to find the coordinates for Union Glacier Camp by going to their detailed brochure, which had their coordinates over here. And then I got more feedback, and next thing you know, this is the video that I'm making today. Part of the feedback that I got from my last video, one of the people that I follow on the platform formerly known as Twitter, Piper Australis, was able to give me a link to what looks like an electronic copy of a map that people can buy when they get down there, or maybe they're given that. I don't know. But this looks like about the size of a folded paper map, and on the back you can see that's where the camp is. I was interested in this little bit over here, so I copied that into a new image, and I also copied the horizontal and the vertical scale so that I could see the coordinates. I ultimately figured out that this was going to be where the camp was going to be situated, and I wanted to get the geo coordinates. So counting horizontal pixels and matching them to longitudes and counting vertical pixels, matching them to latitudes, I was able to get the geocoordinate for this pixel right about here in the middle of this. What also stood out to me was that when I saw the contour lines, something didn't quite match. It did not appear to match Google Earth. It didn't seem to match the elevation profiles from videos that other people took. Most importantly, when I saw that the camp was a little bit closer to Mount Rossman than I originally thought, I figured I was going to make this video to update the previous videos that I made. So now the trick was to come up with a way to get half decent elevation profiles that was a little bit more detailed than this elevation map. After considerable research, I found this site from NASA, and there's a link right here that you can click, and it allows you to download, and I forget exactly which link it was on this page. It looked like I was able to download the Bed Machine Antarctica dataset. After a fair bit of effort to get it extracted, I was able to get a little bit of it, because this is the original export was 13,000 pixels times 13,000, and it was quite large. So I just extracted the top left corner to get this part over here where Mount Rossman is located. And the issue with this is that at best I figured there was about 5 pixels by 3 pixels for the entire Mount Rossman, which did not give me enough detail. So I had to go and find some other source to be able to get my elevation data. I ultimately found the site topographicmap.com, and it is an interactive map. It gives you a color representation of the different elevations along with a scale that tells you what those elevations are. And the trick was to turn this into something that I could reference and match a given geocoordinate to a given elevation. Luckily, if I turn on the debugger in the browser, I was able to find the URL request that gave me this image. I copied it as a curl command, and then I was able to use curl to download that image on its own. I then inspected the HTML, and I was able to get the RGB values for each of these elevations. At that point, I felt confident that I had something that was reasonably accurate, and the next trick after that was to convert those images into elevation data that I could then reference in something else so that I could then see in this box over here what is the highest elevation. So I basically did what I do best, which is whip up some basic little app that lets the computer do the work for me. I wanted an elevation map profile for the entire area in case I wanted to see what the horizon profile looked like in other directions besides Mount Rossman. But the main point of this video was to try to figure out whether or not Mount Rossman was going to interfere with being able to see the sun unobstructed. And what I ended up doing was zooming in like this here in order to get that higher resolution and greater detail. Of course, the problem here is that there are more pixels that take up Mount Rossman in this zoom level as opposed to this one. So I had to scale this one to a bigger image size so that I could then paste this one in the bigger one. And so luckily I was able to scale this one to 400%. And then that allowed me to take this smaller one over here and allowing the region outside of that to be transparent. I just lined up this one into this one. And so hence I've got two elevation profile legends, and I'm loading two inputs and I'm creating a single output. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to get the computer to get the proper elevation on its own. So starting with 284 meters, I interpolated the separate R, G, and B values for each of these, essentially deriving a slope and then calculating what those values should be. So in this case, 0 and 0, so the red would remain 0. The green would go from 192 to 255 in 19 meters of elevation, and the blue would go from 255 to 219 in the same amount. And then I would repeat from 303 to 338, repeat again from 338 to 383 all the way to the top. So essentially I had 1854 minus 284 meters of elevation every meter. And the last trick was to be able to look up what the closest color was in that expanded legend. So for each RGB value from the image, I ultimately examined every single elevation. If the two values were identical, then the difference between them would be 0. And I used the XOR function to XOR the image's RGB value from the computed RGB value, and then separating the red, green, and blue values. I then added each one of them up to create a difference between them, and I went and looked for the best fit. So I essentially found a way to calculate the local elevation minimum, and then once I had that, that was the elevation in question. Just to make sure that everything was relatively correct, I then took the elevation profile, divided it by the maximum of 1,865 feet for the entire combined image, then multiplied by 255. That gave me an RGB value that I then converted to grayscale, and this is the result. So when I saw this, I was relatively confident that I was able to properly extract the colors and to come up with an elevation profile. I then wrote the elevation data out into a text file for the next phase of this project. One of the features that I implemented in my skywatching app a very, very long time ago was related to the fallout of Ranty when he saw that the Blackpool Tower was too high relative to the background if the earth was flat, which ultimately made him realize that the earth wasn't flat. And the flat earthers had a field day because of that. And so one of the features that I implemented was to take elevation profile data that I got from elsewhere to essentially recreate my own copy of that famous image. As a result, this code existed, and it just took me a little bit of time to kind of understand it and work through the issues that were latent in it. And after a few iterations of exporting this data to Pavre, which was one of the features that this thing supported, I found and fixed a small little transformation bug that I had introduced a long time ago. And ultimately, I was able to take the data that I got from those images and export them as a data set that I was able to use in Pavre to create an image. So if this is the standard that I should be attempting to replicate, after all of those conversions and transformation of elevation data images and conversion to data points for Pavre, how close to this could I get? This is what I came up with. As it turns out, this point of Mount Rossman, which is on the east side, is 1,452 meters, and this point is 1,300 and some meters. So according to this elevation map is wrong. This side over here should be 1,450, not this. In my back and forth with other people, the question came up of whether or not they would see the sun blocked by Mount Rossman or not. I believe Where's Wally brought that up. Somebody else made the suggestion that Will Duffy and or somebody else in the expedition should bring along a drone so that they could take a picture at a higher altitude to see whether the sun really set or not. And Piper Australis on the platform formerly known as Twitter also did a bit of an analysis and also shared results on that platform. If I have the elevation data and elevation profile correct, I should be able to produce a reasonably accurate prediction animation video, which I will play now. And finally, the last thing that I would like to suggest is if the expedition will be bringing a drone along, my recommendation would be at the appropriate time when the sun appears to be lowest in the sky and risk being obscured by Mount Rossman, my suggestion would be to use that drone to take a bird's eye view of the area and to see how the shadow cast by the mountain on the snow compares to this animation that I made. As of the latest data that I have, it looks like if the coordinates that I was able to determine are correct, and if the elevation profile is correct, there should be no risk at all anywhere inside that camp circle for the sun to be obscured. That's going to be it for now. Thank you for watching. If you like what I did, you know what to do. And with that, I'm going to see you again in another video soon enough, I hope. So bye for now.